is July 25th, 2007. I am Jessica Clark. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Bismarck, North Dakota. To start with, can you please state your full name?
Elda Regina Rasch.
And what is your maiden name?
Schultz.
And where were you born?
Fredonia, North Dakota, Logan County.
And when were you born?
September 20th, 1928.
Did you ever hear a story about your birth?
Yes, I did. It was thrashing time, and my brother was 18 years older than I, so he had to put the storm windows on because this baby was coming and it might get cold, Dad said, so he had to stay home from the rig and put the storm windows on, and guess what? By night they had a baby girl. And I was that much younger than all my rest siblings.
How many siblings did you have?
I had 5.
And can you take me from the oldest to the youngest and tell me their names?
I had William, and he was 18 years older than I, and Leonard was 17 years older than I, and my other sister was 10 years older than I, and then her name was Lenora, and then Olivia, she was, I think, 5 years older. She passed away at infancy, and then I came along in 28.
How did your sister pass away?
I really don't know. It was something to do with some kind of growth of some kind, and they couldn't do anything about it. So she was, I think, 3 months maybe or something like that. Yeah.
So you were the baby.
I was the baby.
What was it like growing up with all the older siblings?
Well, everybody tried to boss you, have you do what you really didn't want to do. But a lot of fun, too. I mean, I did a lot of things with them, which I wouldn't have, if I'd have had ones that were my age, wouldn't have been the opportunity. And my one brother, he was such a tease. He was always doing something goofy with me, like throwing me in a bed and covering me up and telling me, this is where I had to stay. And of course I got scared, and then he'd put me on a calf and he'd run the calf around until I fell in the manure and all that kind of stuff. So it was fun, and it wasn't. Some things weren't so funny.
Which brother was that?
Leonard. Mm-hmm.
So let's start with your brother William. When you think back to your childhood,
he was more like a father to me. He was more of a serious person, and I was not too many memories. I remember him sitting and holding me when I was little a lot, because I had ear infections a lot, and he would carry me at night and stuff like that. I remember that. And then he left and he worked out a lot from home. So I didn't get as close to him as I did the other siblings.
You mentioned that you had ear infections. What would they do for ear infections back then?
Put oil, some kind of an oil that they put in heat it and put the drops in your ear, and Mom would put a plate on the stove and heat it up and then wrap it in a dish towel and hold it on or a hot water bottle. But the dry heat, Mom said, was better. And of course, that's the way they doctored it until it finally left, Sometimes you'd run a fever, sometimes you didn't, so.
Did you ever go to a doctor for him?
Not really.
And what about Leonard, when you think about him?
Oh, he was a fun guy. He was always getting me into trouble, but he was a real lovable man. And of course they got married and lived with us for 5 years. So we got close to his wife too, and then they had one little girl by the name of Mabel, and I sort of took over with her. She was sort of like, well, I didn't have little ones around to grow up with, so that was really a novelty, to have her.
What was his wife's name?
Ida.
And can you tell me a little bit about her?
She was a gal that could do anything and everything, and she was full of fun and laughter, and just was such a great person. She was more like a friend than a sister-in-law. And we all lived in this one house, ate at the same table, and there was And we had our grandmother with us too, and she had dementia. So can you imagine what that was like?
So how many people were there in the house?
Well, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 with me. And Mom did all the cooking. And of course, Dad and the boys, they farmed. Because my dad thought, they couldn't do this on their own. And they were 30-some years old, but, in those days, why? The son had to take over the farms, that's how that worked. So Leonard took over the home place, and Willie, we built a home next, about a mile away from our place. And he lived there then until he died.
So you said your grandmother lived with you. Which grandmother?
My dad's grandma, Grandma Hogg. She lived with us 7 years.
And what was her first name?
Marie.
What was that like, having her live with you?
Not good, because I was getting to be a teenager, and of course you had to be home with her all the time because you didn't know what she would do or where she, you'd have to keep the doors bolted so she wouldn't get out because she'd walk away. So a lot of times I wanted to go play with, go out with my friends. Well, I couldn't because I had to stay home with Grandma. Well, that didn't go over too well. So it wasn't too good. In those days they had no nursing homes, So it was up to the parents to take care of them.
How long did she live with you?
7 years. And then being my dad was the only one that she brought over from the old country, the other siblings thought he should take care of Grandma. So he did. Or Mom did, or we all did.
Do you have any memories of her before the dementia?
Yes, I do. She lived in town in a house, big house, and she was a very quiet person to herself. And she was she always cleaned. She was always cleaning and shaking rugs and all that. That's what I remember. Remember going there, and then we had to sit real still, and that was hard for me to do. And couldn't touch things. So she was her own person, more or less.
How far was her house from your house?
Oh, I would say we lived in the country, so I say about 4 miles.
And did she live in town?
Yes, she did. She lived in Fredonia.
Did you know her husband, your grandfather?
Vaguely, not much. I just sort of have vaguely. I know he had a full beard. I remember that. And he was, what I heard the other ones say, he was a very lovable man, but I never got to really know him.
What was his name?
John, or Johannes, or whatever in those days they call him German.
So, did he die before you got a chance to know him?
Yes, he did. And what he died from, I have no idea. But
do you know where he's buried at?
Yeah, he's buried in a cemetery in Fredonia.
Let me see here. Okay, so your grandmother and grandfather came over from Russia together?
Yeah, yes.
Do you know when they came over?
I don't. 86 came in. Oh, okay. In 1890, he was born in 1886, and they came to this country in 1890.
Okay. And your father was the only.
And then of course she married this Hogg over in the old country, and then they had a Nathaniel, and he was little when they came over this country, but my dad was the only one by the name of Schultz.
So did your grandfather and grandmother have any family left in Russia?
Oh yes, yeah. My dad had 2 half-brothers in Russia by the name of Schultz. And he always talked about it, and he said his grandma would not let them come with their stepmother. She kept them back. So, but he always had letters from them and wrote to them and everything, and they were very wealthy until that Russian, when they had to invade, and stuff, and then we had to send stuff over there for them and stuff. And what happened, I don't know. We lost contact with them then.
So your dad then didn't have any relatives over here?
Not by the name of Schultz.
Okay.
He had an aunt in South Dakota, and she was, her married name was Schmier, but she was a Schultz, so that was his aunt then. That was the only one but I never knew her. I just talking about it.
Did your grandparents have any other kids after they came to America?
Yes, they had 7 other siblings.
Did you know them when you were
Yes, I
growing up?
knew them very well.
Would you like to talk about how you knew them and like how often
Well,
you visit them?
we got together. One brother had 10 children, so of course that was always a great place to go for me because they had their own ball team, and I was raised sort of a loner, really with my siblings being so older than I. And I loved to go there. And then I had an aunt that was sort of my favorite, that I liked to go and still keep in touch with a cousin. We could get together every fall.
What was her name, your aunt's name?
Anna.
What was it about her that you really enjoyed?
The way she was just a neat person. She could bake and, lovely food. And of course she was just always sort of doing jokes and playing games and stuff like that. She always, you never got scolded from her. That's what I liked.
And then your uncles that you went to with the 10 children, what was his name?
Nathaniel.
How would you describe him?
He was a very quiet man and reserved man. Very close to my dad.
When you were growing up, how far away did all of these brothers and sisters live of yours?
Well, most of them lived pretty much around there. In the area, driving distance,
And how often would you get to visit?
Oh, well, maybe once a week, maybe every other week. Depends on Sunday afternoons. Of course, when they came, they didn't have a car big enough or whatever, and they couldn't all come then. So they'd only come with a partial of the family.
So when your parents would have people over for an afternoon, how would they entertain their guests?
Oh, tell stories, laugh a lot. My dad was really a jokey man and always happy.
What was your father's name?
Rudolph.
When you think about him, how would you describe him?
He was sort of a serious man. When he spoke, he meant it. Didn't speak out of turn too much. And self-educated. He went to the 3rd grade, but never got to finish. And then he educated himself with his own books, read a lot, and stuff. Was very educated in politics and all that kind of stuff. So, of course, he was, they were old to me because I'm sure they were. My mother, I think, was 41 or 42 when I was born. So I can remember always thinking, I wished I had young parents, which was sort of foolish. But then at that time, all my friends had young parents, So.
Did your dad ever play with you when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah. We'd play checkers and play, not ball so much, but hide and seek and stuff like that.
Did he have a good sense of humor?
Yes, he did. He liked people.
How would he show his affection toward you?
Oh, I don't know. In those days, there wasn't such a thing as throwing your arms around each other, or anything like that, but you felt it. You felt the closeness with him.
How about if you got in trouble? How would he discipline?
Then it wasn't good. It was. He was. I only had one spanking I can remember, but I can remember him when something wasn't right or we'd done something wrong. he really gave us a talking to. Or else he'd go, then we knew it was time to shape up or ship out.
Do you know how he met your mother?
He worked for my mother's family. And they just started to date or whatever they did, and then he married her. He was really had nothing. He was, well, after those 7 siblings were born, there wasn't much to go around, and so he was considered the oldest, and his name wasn't the same as the rest, so he had to go out and fend for himself. So he worked for my mother's family for a number of years, as I remember.
Let's talk about your mother's side of the family for a while. Did you know your grandparents on that side?
I knew my grandmother real well. Never knew my grandfather.
What was your grandmother's name?
Dorothea
And what was her, do you know her maiden name?
Geisler.
And what was her married name?
That was her maiden name was Siegler. Yeah, and then her married name was Geisler. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. And what was your grandfather's name?
Frederick.
And I'm guessing, since you didn't know him, he died before you were born.
Uh-huh.
Did they come over from Russia?
Yes, they did. My mother didn't. My mother was born in America.
Talk about your grandmother for a while.
She was a neat lady. I never knew her with teeth in her mouth. And she never wore shoes in the summertime. And in the wintertime, she'd knit her socks, and she'd put some leather soles on there, and then she had a pair of shoes for Sunday. That was it. And she'd walk across the stubble fields in the summertime, and so I spent a lot of time with her growing up.
Where did she live?
She lived only half a mile from us. She lived with her son and his wife.
And you said you spent a lot of time with her. What would you do with her?
Oh, we'd be in the garden, and we'd sit in the shade and just visit, and then she'd bring me some lemon drops and all that kind of stuff. And I'd have to help, weed the garden. I suppose I pulled out more plants than weeds, but and they always had a dog that was really a pet, so that was a great joy. She was just a neat lady.
Did she ever tell you stories about what life in Russia was like?
Not really. She touched on it, but not really. All she'd say, ich will's vergessen. Don't want to remember it. So it must have been hard times.
Did she ever tell you why, or did you ever learn why they left?
To look for a better place, and they heard that America was such a good country, and then of course they had relatives that were here already and wrote for them to come here, and then they settled in South Dakota first, and then they migrated out to North Dakota and different places.
So your grandparents, did they homestead in North Dakota?
Yes.
And how many children did they have?
They had, they had my mom, Aunt Anna, Uncle Richard, Uncle Garrett living, and I think 4 of them had died in infancy with diphtheria. 4 or 5, I can't really remember how many.
So did you know your aunts and uncles on that side of the family?
Yes, I did.
And what do you think about them when you're child?
They were, I don't know, they didn't do too much. Both of them didn't have any families, so they were children were not really their thing. They were better seen and not heard, I guess.
Did they live close to you as
Yeah,
well?
they all lived about, well, Grandma and Uncle Garrett lived about half a mile, and then Uncle Richard lived about 3 miles.
How about your mother? What was her name?
Regina.
And when you think back, what was she like?
She was, I don't know. In her own way, she was her own person, but very loving and very forgiving and very he never really, she always said, there's always good in somebody. I remember that. And she was really, when Dad passed away, of course, then I went home quite often in the summertime with my family, and we really got to know Grandma, and the kids got to know Grandma. And she was always ready for them, and always had baked up a storm, and fed them. And yeah, she was a lovable person, very good natured.
When you were growing up, would you say, were you close to her?
Yes, I was.
What type of things would you do with her?
Oh, I don't know. We'd sit and embroider, and then we'd play dominoes and all those different kind of things that they did in those days. And then a lot of times we'd have to roll the yarn, into a ball while she was knitting, because she knit mittens and socks and all that kind of stuff. So then we did that a lot. And that's, pretty much what we did. And if we worked out in the fields, we worked together and stuff like that.
Did she teach you how to embroider?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How about with your mother? How did she show her affection?
Oh, she was always, I don't know. If you did something good, she wouldn't really praise you, but you did it good, And if you didn't do it good, why, you knew too, because then she'd show a different way. But she showed her affection, but not like like nowadays. It's a different society now.
How about discipline? How would she discipline you?
Oh, you'd get a spanking. Every once in a while I'd get a spanking if I did something that I shouldn't have done. Yeah, she did. She disciplined.
So who would you say had the final say in the house for discipline? Your father or your mother?
My dad. If she told Dad, then we knew it was bad. Then we better shape up.
Do you know or not do you know, how would you describe your parents' relationship as a couple?
Oh, I think they had a good relationship. They didn't show their affection like we do now. But they did. They used to sit a lot, and as I remember them, sitting and talking and reading, or he'd read. Mom didn't do English too well, so he'd read the paper to her, and they'd sit and sing and stuff like that. And they'd go, when they went away, they usually went away together, they never one by themselves or whatever and stuff. So I don't know, you just knew they cared for each other, let's put it that way.
So in the home, did you guys speak German then?
German, yeah. I didn't speak any English when I went to school.
What was school like for you?
It was hard. I didn't do too well in school. I didn't care for school, and we always had the teachers in board at my place, so I didn't get by with anything.
So you had teachers boarding with you. Was at the same time you would have a full house as well?
No, that was before that.
Can you describe the family home?
It was large. It had 4 bedrooms upstairs, and downstairs we had a guest room, dining room, living room, kitchen, and then we had a sort of a utility room, and the basement was also a kitchen and stuff. There was no bedroom down there, but there was a kitchen and sort of a little sitting room. Yeah, it was a big home, a nice home, all oak woodwork, and was nicely done.
What type of furniture was in the home?
Oh, I thought it was nice. I mean, we had sort of the modern type thing that was in then. We had the in thing, and some was old from Grandma and stuff. And they were all furnished. The rooms were all furnished and stuff. So.
With 4 bedrooms, who slept where?
Well, boys slept in one room, And the teacher slept in one room, and then my sister and I had a room, and then the folks had a room. And then there was still a guest room. And in the summertime, we had an old house, a sort of a, it was another farm owned by the Gutschmidts, and my dad bought that from them. So my brothers, in the summertime, they moved into that old house, and that was their little domain. So they didn't sleep in the big house in the summertime.
Why was that?
Well, because they wanted a little of their own. They were, when I came along, of course, they were older, so they were more like teenagers, so they wanted their own little thing. So then that's where they were.
Your sister was how much older than you?
10 years. I was 10 years old when she got married.
So did she have to, well, then did she move out then when
Yeah.
she got married?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you kind of grew up as an only child.
Yeah, sort of like, yes, I did. My sister wasn't too, I think, resented me a little bit when I came along because of the fact that she had to take care of me, I suppose, and she was the only one, and then along came me, so. And she was sort of her own person too. She was not a people person. So, and she never had a family either after they were married, so.
When you were growing up, who was responsible for the cooking?
My mom did all the cooking. And we'd help, but I mean, she was the main cook.
Did the boys ever help in the kitchen?
Nope. Wipe dishes maybe once in a great while, but not that I remember.
What type of foods would she cook when you were growing up?
Oh, dumplings, strudels, kniffel, and kichle. And she did make a macaroni hot dish. She did that. And then she made a corn, we call it scalp corn now, which was very good. She made that with, I can remember, with macaroni and corn and cheese. It was very, very good. And then, of course, she baked all her own bread, rolls, kuchen. We had all that.
How often did she have to bake bread?
Oh, I suppose twice a week. And then we always had, that day then we had those bread kichle, the bread dough kichle that you deep fried. Then you took, like the Indians do now, they have that, yeah. Or tacos or whatever. Not, I don't suppose they'd be like fry bread.
When you were growing up, what was your favorite dish that your mother made?
Strudels, I think, and chocolate cake, and chocolate pie. Oh, she made the best chocolate pie and the cake too, just, with thick frosting on it, it was just scrumptious. Most of the meals, I didn't, there were some I didn't. I didn't like cornmeal, like mush and that kind of thing. That was not, I didn't care for that, but we had to eat it.
Would you have that often?
No, not too often, but we had it every once in a while. Then you had to, I'd used to keep mine in the mouth forever. I didn't want to go down. But anyway.
Can you tell me a little bit about what a mealtime was like?
Oh, well, my dad was he didn't like laughing and stuff like that, He was very firm. And then talked over what they were going to do, or were there, all that and stuff like that. But laughing and joking, he didn't really care for that too much. But my brother, Leonard, he was the instigator. Of course, he'd get us laughing, and then we'd get in trouble. So, and then after prayers, well, then that was one thing we did every morning. We had prayers and Andacht, they called it. And then we always had a little glass of wine or schnapps, that homemade, what is it called? Wedding schnapps or something like that. We always had a little glass of that before we started our meal in the mornings, always.
Yeah. Do you remember what prayer you would say before you ate?
Oh, well, Come Lord Jesus, that one, and then that was like in German, Komm Herr Jesus, sei uns Gast, segne uns alles, was du beschert hast. That was our main one all the time. And then otherwise, if if there was something that needed to be prayed about, well, then he had his prayer that he would say, out of his little book or whatever.
So what denomination were you?
Lutheran.
And when you were growing up, how important was religion to your family?
Very. That was a must. We went to church every Sunday, unless you were so sick you couldn't go. And then when we had churches like at Advent and all that, we always attended all of those churches, unless the blizzard came and we couldn't get there or whatever, but otherwise we were in church.
You mentioned Sundays. What would Sunday after church, what would you do?
Well, there was always people asked over for dinner, or else we were asked someplace. There was always Gemeinschaft, they call it, like, I don't know what you'd call it now, like get together or whatever. Yeah, on Sunday afternoons. I can't remember too many Sunday afternoons when we didn't have company,
Would your mother prepare a special meal?
Oh yeah, Saturdays, we always prepared for the Sunday dinner. Like the cake, and that was in the jello, and then soup, usually noodle soup, and chicken and rice and all that. Was sort of gotten ready so that if company came, we were ready for them. That was always, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about daily life. How often when you were growing up would you take a bath?
Well, once a week, I suppose, I think. And that was in the same water my sister took. So that's, until I got to be, I think it was about 12, 13. Then my brothers rigged up a sort of a barrel above a building, a little shed. And then we'd carry the water up, if you can imagine, carry the water up into this barrel so it'd get hot during the day. And then we had like a little sprinkler that you used to sprinkle clothes with, those little tops. And we fixed that on there, and then that was our shower then. So then we took showers like maybe twice a week or three. Yeah.
You mentioned hauling water. Where would you have to haul water from?
Well, from the house or from the cistern or wherever. Yeah. Then we'd carry it up there.
So you did have running water then in the house?
We had, no, we had a well. We had to get it from the well and take it in. And
you mentioned before you had the nice rigged shower
yeah.
that you would take baths in the same water. Where would you take a bath at?
In the kitchen, usually. In the evening when everybody was out of the kitchen, and then Mom would heat the water up, and that's where we'd take a bath.
And where was the bathroom?
Outside, behind the house.
Let's see here. How about brushing your teeth? Was that something you did when you were growing up?
Yeah, I didn't own a toothbrush.
Do you remember when that became something that you should do?
Well, when you got to be 14, 15.
And then at that point, did you have toothpaste?
Soda.
Did you ever go see a dentist when you were a kid?
Oh, yes, I had teeth pulled and scared to death. Oh, yeah, we had to pull them. There wasn't such a thing as anything else. That tooth had to come out, Oh, yeah. I'd scream all the way up to the dentist's chair and carry on until it was out. Yeah.
Let's see. How about laundry? How would you guys do laundry back then?
Well, we had a machine in Maytac. They bought a new machine when I was born. So, and and we'd carry the water and heat it up, put it in, and then we'd wash in the basement. And then we had our own light plant after I got a little older. That was run by the wind chargers, like they have now, the wind, what do they call those wind things now?
A windmill type thing?
No, those that they have by Lemoore or Edgeley or in through there. And it was run by that. So if the wind blew, of course, then we'd have enough juice to keep this going. But if the wind didn't blow, then we had a little, I don't know what was, an engine or whatever it was called, and then she'd start that up, and then that would run the machine.
And who was responsible for doing the laundry?
Well, Mom, usually. And we had help. We had to help hang the clothes up. And
How about ironing? How would you do ironing?
with the iron, with flat irons, we had to heat them on the stove and stuff, yeah. And there were a lot of white shirts. The boys wore white shirts all the time when they went out.
Were those hard to keep clean?
Well, they were hard to iron and hard to keep clean, yeah. You know, they were all cotton, and then Mom starched them with, you made her own starch out of just the regular starch that you have now that you use for cooking. She'd make that and make it quite stiff, and then she'd starch these shirts. So these shirts, they stood by themselves almost. And then to iron those, they were hard to iron. But I didn't do much of that because I did most of the outside work. I was outside a lot.
What type of work did you do?
When I was growing up, milked cows and worked on the fields, dragged, worked on the thrashing rigs, hauled grain, all that kind of stuff. And hold the garden, hold the trees, and all that kind of stuff.
What type of a garden, how would you describe your garden when you were growing up?
Big. A lot of stuff in it. My mother always had a big garden, and that had to be kept clean. And I didn't like to hoe potatoes, and I didn't like to pick potato bugs, and that had to be done. So there was always work to do.
You were born in 1928, correct? Mm-hmm. Do you have any memories of what is known as the Dirty 30s?
Yes, I do. I was about, how old was I then? In 36. That I can remember the best. I can remember the thistles. They were so bad, and we had to cut them. And then the little hay we had left, Dad would mix that up together, and feed the cattle. Oh, it was horrible. The dirt piles were just, there was no fences, there was just dirt piles. I can remember that. And I can remember the folks really it was so sad, Everybody was sad. And there was a lot of praying going on at that time.
How about did you ever see any dust storms?
Yeah, that was at that time too, yeah. You couldn't see across the road sometimes. It was like a blizzard, snow blizzard. And then, of course, I remember the grasshoppers too. They were so thick that you couldn't be outside.
Did they have any way of controlling the grasshoppers?
Well, yeah, they had some kind of, I don't know what it was called. I was too little to know, but I mean, they didn't really, that didn't do much good. Did some, but not really that much.
Something else that I've heard that was in abundance at that time were jackrabbits. Did they affect your farm?
We didn't, yeah, well, we butchered jackrabbits. We ate jackrabbits. Mom would make them just like chicken. She'd roll them in flour and fry them. They were good. And then they had the jackrabbit hunts, they'd get together, all these farmers, and then they'd have this great big hunt. And I don't really know if they sold them then or what they did. That I don't remember, but I remember the hunts they had. And I suppose they ate some of the field stuff and too.
Did you ever participate in any trapping or hunting when you were a kid?
No, gopher hunting, yes. Did a lot of gopher hunting.
How would you hunt gophers?
Oh, well, we had traps we had a set, and then we'd get them in there. We'd set them one day, and then the next day we'd go out and get them out, and then we'd reset the traps, and then we'd cut the tails off, and of course those were I think 2 cents a tail. But you had to kill them first, and then one time I remember we didn't kill them, and then we let them run, and Dad found out about it. Oh my, that was the end of our hunting for a while, for trapping for a while. Because we were supposed to kill them, Of course, I suppose we thought that was a big joke when they were running around without tails.
So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys celebrated holidays when you were growing up?
Oh, we always had, we celebrated birthdays. All the aunts came and the grandma and stuff, and we always had cake and ice cream if it was in the wintertime. And holidays, we always had nice Easter supper or dinner, usually. Christmas was a big thing for my dad. He just loved Christmas, and he would give, like, the uncle that had the 10 children, they all got a gift. All the nieces and nephews got gifts. It maybe wasn't much. And then he'd buy fruit, and in a case and stuff and take it. And I can remember that. He didn't, like, we didn't get much. It was maybe just some little thing, but I mean, it was always remembered and had a nice dinner. And of course, church was very important. That we did first.
Was that on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve?
Christmas Eve we had church, and then we'd come home, and we were the first ones that had electricity go through our, well, in that area. So we were the first ones that had Christmas lights. And I can remember the family coming over with the 10 children, with the Christmas. Oh, and they were just awesome by those lights. Oh, man. They just couldn't get enough of that, which we now take for granted.
How old were you?
I suppose I was about maybe 8, 9, something, 10, something like that. I think I was 10, 11 when we got that coming through there then. And
So then you had a Christmas tree?
yeah, we always had a Christmas tree. Maybe it wasn't a very big one, but we always had a Christmas tree.
Was Santa Claus a big thing?
Not really. Christkindli was the thing, Yeah, they doted on that more than Santa Claus because it was a Christian thing to do. But we did have one time Santa Claus came. I can't even remember who it was, but I was scared to death. I can remember that. I didn't care if he left me anything or not, if he just wanted to get out of there.
And you mentioned that Easter was a pretty big thing.
Mhm.
How would you celebrate Easter?
Easter, we always dyed eggs with onion peelings and crepe paper. The crepe paper that you used for flowers and stuff made that, like you do now with well, what's that called now? The flowers they make with the paper flowers or whatever. Anyway, that's what Mom cooked, and then she made that into a dye, and then that's what we dyed our Easter eggs with. Yeah, we always had those, and then we had. My brother always tried to eat the most. Then he'd get sick. And my uncle, Uncle Garrett, he was my sponsor. So one year I got this beautiful chocolate rabbit. He was pretty big. I would say about, I don't know how big, but anyway, it was pretty big. And so of course I was just so proud of that rabbit, and we had it for quite a while. And my brother said, we got to butcher that rabbit. He said, because it's gonna get old. And of course I didn't want to because I didn't want to eat it. Well, one day I came in, must have been outside, came in the house, and my brother had said, he had him on the table and he had the butcher knife, and he said, well, we're going to cut his tail off first. Well, of course, that wasn't too bad. Well, he cut the tail off, and of course we ate that. Well, now he said, now we have to cut the head off. Well, of course, then I bawled and bawled and bawled. Well, anyway, needless to say, he got most of the chocolate rabbit. And I bawled.
Which brother was this?
It was Leonard. Yeah, he was the one that always. And my mother, she was upset because he did that, but. So Easter was more of a, religious holiday, more so than now. It was more.
How about 4th of July? How was that celebrated?
Oh, if there was a 4th of July close by, we would maybe go in the afternoons, and be with our friends and stuff and families. And we'd always pack a picnic basket or something, and have like orange crush pop, I can remember, and bologna, sweet, and bread, homemade, bought and bread. We didn't get that very often, so that was really a treat. And bananas and stuff. But if it wasn't close by, we didn't drive. That was sort of wasted, a wasted thing to do. If the crop was ready, you did that first or whatever,
So what would be close by? Like,
Oh, Gackle had one, Cullum had one, and Fredonia had one. And one time I remember we went to Jamestown, which was quite a ways, but my aunt lived in that area, so we went and did that. But otherwise, it was pretty much. Or we'd sometimes the aunts would, or the uncles would have something, and then we could go there, watch fire. They had a little bit of fireworks or whatever.
Valentine's Day, was that celebrated?
Oh, yeah, we got in school. Of course, that was after I started school. Of course, we had the teachers in board, so then, of course, we always got to make Valentines, and give Valentines. And, of course, my brother always had to do something with the Valentines. Either he'd cut a hole in them when we'd have them. We'd cut them out of paper, color them and stuff, and then he'd cut a hole in them, or, we didn't know that, and then we'd give it to some, yeah. Well, we had Valentine boxes. I remember that as I got older in school and stuff, yeah.
A Valentine box, what's that?
Oh, that was like a shoe box, and then you decorated it with different colored paper you had or whatever, colored the paper sacks and sort of pasted them on there, put little hearts on and stuff like that, yeah. Then, of course, if you had somebody that you really liked, that one, a boy or whatever, well, you gave him a Valentine,
How about Halloween? Was that something that was celebrated?
Yeah, I don't remember ever, other than in school. Otherwise, we didn't, not that I remember.
How would it be celebrated in school?
Oh, we'd have Halloween, we'd make masks out of paper sacks, and stuff like that, and colored scary pictures maybe, and stuff like that, and maybe the teacher would make some candy, and we'd have candy or something, but otherwise there wasn't much of anything,
Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving was always, yeah, my mother was usually the cook. She always had a big turkey, and because we had the big house, so then everybody would, and usually we had the aunts and the uncles, or whoever could come, would come, yeah.
What about when your parents would butcher? Would there be a big...
They all butchered in the the neighbors. They went to one neighbor butchered, and then they went to the other neighbor. I didn't like butchering because I didn't like the smell.
Did you have to help?
Well, help clean up the mess, yeah, when I was old enough to do it, And sometimes I had to turn the sausage maker, to make the sausage and stuff, sometimes if I was around or whatever. Yeah. But otherwise, I didn't really help.
Is there any other type of celebration or holiday that you guys took in that we haven't talked?
I don't know. Weddings, of course, we did weddings, yeah. Weddings was a big thing then, And of course, there was enough to eat there all the time, and enough to drink and stuff. They always had a good time. My wedding was, we baked kuchen for 2 days, I think, and then we butchered a hog and made the hams, all that, and then we had noodle soup, you can imagine, and stuff, and then, and then Dad would make that Hochzeit schnapps, and then we'd have a dance afterwards, and had somebody that played the accordion, and you'd dance until I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning when we finally quit dancing, you just had a good time. Now, that was after the wedding and the church and stuff, and then.
Do you remember the first wedding you attended?
Oh, yeah, sort of. She was my sponsor later in life then. Or, I mean, she was my sponsor. That's why I suppose I was at the wedding. I don't remember, but I remember vaguely, the wedding. What you do sometimes when you're a child, you pick out some certain things and it stays with you. Well, that's what it was. It was, she would have been my mom's cousin.
What was her name?
Hulda Amon.
Let's talk a little bit about school. I'm guessing since you grew up in the area of Fredonia, was it a one-room schoolhouse?
I grew up I was in a Hog Township is where I went to school. That was just a one-room schoolhouse. I went to country school. I never went to high school.
Okay, we're going to ask a couple concluding questions. When you think back to your childhood, what is one of the scariest experiences you had?
Oh, I don't know. When I was little, I was scared of being left alone. That was a lot of my fear. Being, are they going to, my brothers would, I think they instilled that, and I was always scared, they were going to leave me. Somebody was going to leave me. So that was one of the things. Other than that, not too much of anything else, but it was all. And then my parents too, they were old, and older than most parents, and I was always scared, they would die and I would be left alone and stuff like that. But most fear was what they instilled in me, I think, to make me afraid of things, stuff. So.
How about one of your happiest memories?
I don't know. I was always happy, pretty much. I wasn't very, there were times when I was down, but most of the time I'm always sort of up, and I was that way from a little kid on. And I was always happy, and when we got to do things, that was always important to me, oh boy, we got to do this and we got to do that, and got to go along. And I did get to go along a lot with my parents because I was left, and the brothers didn't want me, the sister didn't want me because they wanted to do their thing, so I ended up with the folks. And they went to visit people their age, and I think that's how come I learned a lot about the heritage, about the relatives, because now my sister always said, well, how come you know so much? Well, I was there and I listened, and I was one of these kids that I liked to hear things like that, and I would keep them. So, I don't know, weddings or anything like that, or just going to church was happy for me because then I'd get to see my friends, And that was very important to me. Friends were very important to me, and I think that's because I didn't have any siblings my age. So.
How about one of the most adventurous things you did in your youth?
Well, I was a camp counselor for the Luther League when I was about 17, and we went to South Dakota, and I had a whole bunch of kids, me and another gal, and then we had to take them out on a canoe. I had canoes, and of course none of them could swim. Now that wasn't thinking too straight, and I couldn't either, and that was sort of very adventurous for me to think, coming from Fredonia, North Dakota, where there isn't much lake, and water, and I can still remember that so well, That was really one of my big adventures to do that, So, pretty much things like that, yeah.
We've covered a number of topics, but is there anything about your childhood that we didn't discuss that you wanted to share today?
I don't know. I think we discussed pretty much everything. Pretty much of what I did when I grew up and stuff, and different things, and did my girl, this Annetta, and I, they built a barn, and years ago, everybody got together when they built a barn, you had all these people to feed, and I was 17, and I don't know, or was I must have been 17, and she was 18, I think, or something like that. Anyway, we cooked for those, we did all the cooking for those men. And oh my, how we made graham cracker pie, I'll tell you, big. And this aunt of Annetta's lived not too far. She did the bread for us. But otherwise, we did everything else. We cooked the meals, 3 meals a day. And, that was really something for two girls to undertake that. So that was really something that I remember and think back of, you know. And sometimes things didn't turn out, you know. But we always got compliments, you know, when they left the house, oh, how good the meal was. And now I think back and I wonder if it was really that good. But macaroni and cheese, you couldn't spoil then either, you know. But that was really something that I really remember, you know. And then I did a lot of babysitting or working for people. That was my first year. That was when I was about 16, I think. Well, I was closer to 17, I think. And I worked for farmers, Balser Kleingartners. And they had a big family, and she went into the hospital for some kind of surgery. So he hired me, and I took care of that family. There was 4 kids that went to school, so I had to make lunch pails and all that. The girls had long hair, I had to braid them. And I had to wash clothes for all the boys because there was jeans, cooked a meal, and he let me have one boy in the kitchen. He had to help me, you know, and stuff. And when I got done that month, I was there for a month, I got $50. Oh, man, I thought I was rich. But I worked got up at 5 o'clock in order to get them all fed and ready for school, you know. And then it was get the dinner on. Then you had to cook again and bake bread. I baked bread every other day, 6 loaves. So I did that, and that sort of stayed in with me too, you know, when you get older and think about it. Think about the $50 that you got when you worked a whole month. Now they make more than $50 a day, and they still complain. But, you know, our society is so different now. So that's about the extent of all things that went on.
I have one final question for you, and that is, why did you decide to participate in this project today?
Because my children are not very interested in the heritage. They don't, the only one is the one in Texas. She did want some and did want to know. But the rest of them aren't too interested in the relatives, the cousins, or anything. And I thought, first I wasn't going to do it. And then I talked to the daughter, and she said, you should do that, Mom. And then if you get a video, see, then they'll know a little bit about it. But that's what made me do it. I thought, well, I can do this. You know, I don't know how well I did, but I tried.
You did well. We really enjoyed it, and we thank you for taking the time
Okay.
to do this. So.